She burned the last letter that held her future, and with it, every promise she once believed in. Standing alone on a cold Montana platform with just 11 cents to her name, Elizabeth Carter had nothing left. No husband, no plan, no way back. But what if losing everything was the very thing that led her to something greater? Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about survival. It's about a woman who turned betrayal into power.
Elizabeth Carter took every one of Tom Whitaker's promises and fed them right into that depot stove, all 8 pages of his pretty lies. She stood ramrod straight, watching it all turn to ash, while the other womenfolk backed away like a broken heart was catching. At 29, she had 11 cents, no husband on the way, and a fella ready to lock up for the night. She'd just torched her whole future, but Liz didn't cry. She'd learned the hard way that tears don't pay the bills. Now, if her story's already got a hold of you, go on and like this video. Leave a comment, and tell me what town you're watching from. I truly want to see how far her story travels. And hit subscribe so you don't miss how this all turns out. "Ma'am, that 7:15 was the last train east till Thursday," he said, never looking up from his book. "You'll have to make other arrangements." Liz just stared out at the tracks. "I am aware of the schedule, Mr. Briggs." "Then you're aware I have to lock these doors?" "I am." He finally glanced up, plainly annoyed. His eyes took in her dated coat, her single bag, and the fact that she was all by herself. "You got somewhere to go, ma'am?" "I'm figuring that out." "The hotel is—" "I know where the hotel is." She turned from the window, her voice steady. After 6 years as a bookkeeper, she knew a woman who raises her voice has already lost the argument. She sat on the bench and counted her 11 cents, though she already knew the total. Her last $1.50 had gone to the train ticket from Billings, all because she trusted Tom Whitaker's letters about a bookkeeping job. 8 months of careful back and forth, asking all the right questions. And still, here she was. That's when a sharp voice cut through the quiet down the platform. "That's her." A pause followed. "The one Hargrove sent for but couldn't be bothered to come get." "Poor thing." "Poor thing, my foot," the first one snapped with a laugh. "A woman her age answering an advertisement?" She knew what she was about. Elizabeth didn't give them a glance. She just moved her bag and sat up straighter, just as her mother taught her. "You don't answer them, you just make them insignificant." And she was doing just that when the freight office door swung open. And they were brown and calm, holding none of the pity she'd been batting away all day. He looked at her like a man studying a problem he intended to solve. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Then he kept walking. Harold Briggs appeared with his keys, an apology on his face. "Miss, I am truly sorry, but—" "He is not coming," Elizabeth said flatly. "Thomas Whitaker is not coming. I understand my situation. You can lock your depot." The man with the graying hair had stopped at the door. She felt the stillness of a man who has made a decision. "Forgive me for intruding, ma'am," he said quietly. "William Turner. I run the Turner Cattle Ranch 7 miles north." Elizabeth looked him square in the eye. That seems to be the way of things in train stations. Something in his face shifted like a man recalculating. "Fair enough." He shot a look at Briggs that sent the man scurrying back to his office. "I have a 4-month-old problem," he said to her. "My land records are a complete disaster. My last bookkeeper left for Denver, my tax papers are wrong, and a land company from Chicago claims I owe them land I'm sure is mine." He paused. "Are you the Elizabeth Carter from the Caldwell Land Company in Cincinnati?" She went very still. "How do you know that name?" "I was a Pinkerton for 8 years. I make it my business to know things." "You were the one who found the false numbers?" He held her gaze. "That is not something a woman who cannot read a land survey can do." Down the platform, the 2 women fell silent. Elizabeth sized him up, looking for the catch. "You came here for freight," she said, "not to hire a bookkeeper." "I came for a pump head and 200 feet of fencing. Finding someone who can read a survey plat is what I call a piece of good fortune." He did not push her, he just waited, and his patience was more persuasive than any sales pitch. Elizabeth thought of her 11 cents. She thought of that courtroom in Cincinnati and Tom Whitaker's ashes in the stove. Her mother's voice whispered in her memory. Sometimes the only choice you have is which risk you take on your own terms. I will need to see the original survey plats, she said. The ones with the county stamps. If your records are as bad as you say, I'll know in 2 days if that company's claim is any good. They are in my office. Then we should go before it gets dark. She stood and gave him a steady look. I want it understood, Mr. Turner. I am accepting a job, nothing more. That is all I am offering, Miss Carter. She walked right past the 2 women without so much as a glance. Elizabeth climbed right up into the wagon, surprising him a little, and set her bag down. He took the reins, and they rolled out of cold water as the sun disappeared. That land company, she said once the town lights were behind them. What is it called? Whitmore and Associates. Fella named Gerald Whitmore from Chicago. William guided the team north. He has been snatching up ranch land all over 3 counties, mostly at tax auctions. He finds folks who are behind, buys their debt, and takes their land. Or he makes sure they get behind. He finally looked over. What makes you say it like that? Because I saw it in Cincinnati, she said, her voice steady. Caldwell Land never waited for people to get into tax trouble either. That's not luck. That's a man making his own. The quiet that followed was heavy with thought. My survey shows I hold clear title to 4,800 acres, William finally said. My land runs all the way to Powder Creek, but Whitmore's lawyers filed a claim last month. They say the original survey from 1874 is wrong, and my eastern 800 acres is his. He paused. The lawyer who handled my purchase died a few years back. His papers are with the county, but they've had 3 clerks since then, and none of them can find the original map. Elizabeth recognized the shape of a swindle right away. Things go missing. People look the wrong way. Who did the original survey? A fella from Helena, Thomas Garrett. Is he still in business? Far as I know. Then the state office in Helena has the original survey, no matter what the county lost. She looked him straight in the eye. That's the one record they can't get to, Mr. Turner. County books can be lost or changed with a key and a reason, but state records, well, that's a whole other mess to get into. She waited a beat. In their claim, did they mention the county map by name? They surely did. And not the state copy? No, ma'am. Elizabeth looked ahead as the first stars pricked the dark sky. Then it's one of 2 things, she said. Either they don't know the state has a copy, or they're gambling that you don't. William Turner was silent for a good while. When he spoke, his voice was different, plain and simple, like a man who's made his decision. You pieced all that together just from this talk. I've seen this pattern before. She kept her voice flat. Pride had cost her dearly. It might be nothing. Your papers could be honest, and Whitmore might have a legitimate claim I don't see yet. I can't be sure until I've gone through the documents. Fair enough. He clucked to the horses as the road began to climb. Can I ask you something, Miss Carter? You can ask. What's the real reason you came west? She had a practiced answer ready, just enough truth to pass. But he asked it so plainly, with no angle, that her story felt like a lie. I made a bad judgment back in Cincinnati, she said. I took a man at his word, and when his scheme collapsed, my name was close enough to the wreckage that it took 18 months to get clear. She stared into the dark. They cleared my name, but it made no difference. In a town like that, a woman's reputation doesn't mend like a man's does. I had my skill, but no place to use it. So I saw the advertisement and figured... You figured a fresh start where nobody knew you was worth the gamble, William said. Yes. I can understand that. He said it like a fact, not a comfort. Something similar is why I left the Pinkertons. I knew the truth, but the guilty man had more money than my bosses wanted to fight. I walked away before I'd sign off on a lie, he paused. Bought this place with what I'd saved. It took a long while to stop looking over my shoulder. Does it ever stop? Mostly, he said. On the good days, far off, the ranch lights appeared. She'd pictured a simple, functional outfit. What she saw was a good deal bigger. A main house with a porch running its full width, solid outbuildings, and a bunkhouse with smoke curling from the chimney. "This is quite an operation," she said. 15 years' worth. He guided the wagon toward the house. "For the first 4 years, I slept in the barn." A woman came onto the porch before they stopped. She was in her 60s, with broad shoulders and the no-nonsense look of someone who'd been in charge for a long time. "That's Ruth Sampson," William said quietly. "She runs this house. Don't mind her ways." Ruth came down the steps, sizing Elizabeth up immediately. "You're the bookkeeper." "I am," Elizabeth said. "You know how to cook?" "Well enough. That'll do." The men are terrible at it, and William's too proud to say so. She grabbed Elizabeth's bag before she could move. "Your room's next to the study. Supper's being kept warm." She looked at William. Pete found the east fence cut again. 3rd time this month. William's face was a mask, but his eyes went hard. "Where at?" "A 1/4 mile south of the creek. Miles rode the line this afternoon." Ruth carried the bag inside. "He says it was done on purpose." "I'd say so, too." William was already down from the wagon. "Ruth will get you settled. I need to talk to Miles." He paused, the old Pinkerton in him surfacing. "Miss Carter, if you find anything in those papers, I need to know right away." She met his gaze. "You'll know what I find." He gave a sharp nod and walked toward the bunkhouse with the practiced gait of a man who never wastes emotion. Ruth set Elizabeth's bag in the room and lit a lamp without a word. The room was small but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a desk. On it sat 3 crooked stacks of account books, maps, and receipts, and a leather folder of the type lawyers use. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, staring at the mess. "Been like that since the last fella left in July," Ruth said from behind her. "He left in a hurry," Elizabeth observed. "Why'd he take off?" Ruth hesitated. "Got a better job offer down in Denver." "Who made the offer?" Another pause. "He never said a name." Elizabeth's eyes landed on the leather folder. She recognized the notary seal on its cover. It belonged to Whitmore and Associates. She hadn't even touched it, yet it all clicked. She'd seen this same crooked story before, just with different names. She knew then that her arrival here was no accident. She was exactly where she was needed. "Supper's on the table," Ruth said. Her voice changed, as if she'd finished her assessment and made a decision. "Those books will be there in the morning." Elizabeth placed the Whitmore folder right on top of a stack and followed Ruth to the kitchen. At a long table, 4 ranch hands glanced up, their faces tired and wary of strangers. A young man, not yet 20, started to get up before he caught himself. "This here's Pete Calloway," Ruth said. The young man sat, looking flustered. "Ma'am, Miss Carter will do," Elizabeth said, accepting her plate. After a stretch of polite quiet, Pete finally spoke, his eyes downcast. "Are you really a bookkeeper? Can you make heads or tails of survey maps and tax books?" "I can." He hesitated, then went on. "Good. I've been worried about those records since Marcus left, and I don't reckon it was a job in Denver that drew him away." He glanced at the empty chair at the head of the table. "I think someone paid him to vanish." The table went still. Elizabeth watched the young man. "What makes you say that?" 2 days before he left, a man in a city suit showed up asking for Marcus by name. Not for Mr. Turner, just for him. Pete looked her in the eye, and she saw the weight he'd been carrying. After their talk, Marcus packed his things and was gone that night. Elizabeth set her fork down. The Whitmore file, the cut fence, the missing map. It was all too convenient. This kind of swindle had the same feel, the same bones, as the one she knew from Cincinnati. "Pete," she said softly, "tell me about the man in the suit." Pete cupped his coffee, trying to pull the memory into focus. He was a heavy man, not fat but solid, like he'd lived real comfortable for a long time. His suit cost more than I make in a year. He wore 2 rings, one with a red stone. Pete took a breath. And his boots were clean city boots. That means he came by wagon. Nobody rides into ranch country with clean boots. Did you hear any of their talk? Just a piece. I was fixing the gate latch nearby. Around the table, the other men were listening hard. He used Marcus's first name like an old friend and mentioned a good job in Denver. Then his voice got low. Pete put his cup down. But Marcus's face changed after that. Whatever the man said last, it was no job offer. How did he look? Still. Like a horse that smells danger but isn't sure which way to bolt. He looked right at her. Marcus wasn't a bad fellow, miss. I think he was forced to leave. Elizabeth filed that away. A man who leaves against his will might talk when the time is right. Did anyone else see this visitor? An older man at the far end of the table, his face weathered, spoke without looking up. I did. Name's Miles Cutter. He raised his eyes. I saw his wagon. Had a company mark on it. A W and an A in a circle. Said Whitmore and Associates. Elizabeth's face remained a mask. Thank you, Miles. She finished her meal in silence, knowing better than to push for more. After thanking Ruth, she returned to her room. Sleep wouldn't come. She sat at the desk and read the Whitmore folder twice by the lamplight. It was a legal claim on William's eastern 800 acres, framed as a simple survey correction. The language was precise, written by someone skilled at making a crooked deal look honest. She'd seen it all before. The claim was based on a revised county plat from September of 1881, a full 7 years after William bought the land. A new map, and the original was now conveniently gone from the county office. She closed the folder and lay on the bed in her clothes, letting the lamp burn low. In the darkness, she could hear the horses in the corral and the vast quiet of the land. It was a world away from the city noise she'd always known. She thought about William Turner out at the cut fence and wondered what he'd found. She would soon know. By 5:30 the next morning, she was at the desk, sorting through the chaos Marcus had left in the ledgers. The numbers told a story, if you knew how to listen. William Turner appeared in the doorway at 6:30, bringing the morning cold in with him. He stood a moment, taking in the neat stack she had made from the mess. You've been up since before dawn, he said. It's when I work best, she replied, not looking up. The fence was cut clean with wire cutters, same spot as before. They know our patrol route. He sat in the chair across from her. What have you found? Enough to have questions, she said, putting her pen down. Your taxes are all paid through 1882. There is no reason for a tax claim. She tapped the folder. Their case is about a survey error using a new county plat from 1881 that redraws your eastern border. A plat I've never seen. Mr. Turner, county plats can be amended. The real question is who authorized that change in 1881. Clyde Marsh has been the county surveyor for 11 years, William said. And you trust him? The question hung in the air. No, he finally admitted. Not really. Then the original 1874 survey is what counts. It's at the state office in Helena, and it will trump any county change. She looked at him directly. I need someone to ride to Helena and get a certified copy, in person, not by mail. I'll send Miles. Send someone they won't recognize from this ranch. They may be watching. He grew quiet, weighing the risks. You think they're watching? A swindle this big needs a whole setup, people in the right places. She folded her hands. Back in Cincinnati, a company had men in the assessor's office and the clerk's office. They knew every move their target made before he made it. Her gaze was steady. This claim is built with that same kind of planning. William Turner stared at her for a long minute. How do you know all this? Because for 6 years, she said, her voice even, I was the person who wrote down the numbers that made it all happen. It took me 18 months inside a courtroom to explain numbers like those. He gave a slow nod, not of pity, but of the respect one man gives another who's been through a long fight. What do you need? Your full cooperation and the honest-to-God truth. If there is a single thing about that first sale or those property lines you have not told me, I need to know it right now, before I dig it up and have to wonder why you kept it quiet. Nothing I can think of. He said it straight, without a flicker of doubt. The sale was above board. Garrett surveyed it, filed it clean. I have the receipt. He got up, walked to a far cabinet, and pulled out a worn paper envelope. Survey, deed, and the first tax bill from 1874. Good. She picked up her pen. I will need 3 days, maybe 4, to make sense of this. Take all the time you need. He stopped at the door, wrestling with his thoughts. He finally said, Miss Carter, whatever is in those papers, I want the real truth of it, not some softened story. I would not give you any other kind, she said. He left, and she was glad for the silence. She worked all morning with that deep focus that was her greatest gift, the ability to keep a dozen tangled threads straight in her head, seeing how they all connected. Ruth brought coffee at 8, then eggs at 9, setting them down with a simple command, eat something. And a clean hole existed in the county filing receipts between August and October of 1881, right when the new survey was supposedly filed. Somebody took the papers, not lost them. Took them. The space was too neat for a simple mistake. She was pondering that when Pete Calloway appeared at the open door around 12:30. Miss Carter, Ruth says supper is on. He leaned on the frame, a bit unsure of himself. She also said if you do not come, she will bring a plate in and watch you eat it. She means it. Tell her I will be there in 5 minutes. Was he alone? A driver, Pete said. Stayed on the wagon seat. Did the driver ever get down? He got down once, walked toward the south fence. I figured he was just stretching his legs, but he was gone a good 10 minutes. The south fence line, the spot with the 3 cuts. Thank you, Pete. He turned to leave, then hesitated. Is it bad, what you are finding? Elizabeth figured the honest answer was the kindest one. It is about what I expected, which means we can handle it. She stood. Do not repeat that to anyone, not even Miles. Yes, ma'am. He said it with the gravity of a boy trusted with a man's secret. We know your routines. We know where you are not looking. In the kitchen doorway, Ruth had a look on her face. A look that said she had known all along things were much worse than she was being told. She ate, but tasted nothing. Her mind was already on that desk, fitting the facts into a pattern. The missing papers, the cut fence line, the survey stakes from 1874 that were suddenly in dispute. It was all too perfect to be chance. Gerald Whitmore hadn't just found an opening on William Turner's land. He had built it piece by piece, like a man stacking a deck. Elizabeth had seen that kind of careful planning before, and she had also seen it come crashing down. William's office was the chaos of a man whose mind was sharp, even if his desk was not. She paused at the door, reading the room, searching for the hidden story in the mess. Ledgers. Ledgers were stacked by year. Letters were piled on the desk, meaning he acted on them immediately or not at all. A Pinkerton badge sat in a glass dish like a forgotten memory. She sat down without waiting for an invitation. Tell me what you are thinking, William said, looking at her, not the badge. I would say Gerald Whitmore began this plan about 18 months ago, she said. A new county plat map takes time. You have to make friends, research the old surveys, and find a weak spot. She folded her hands. And I do not believe Marcus just left for Denver. William went rigid. What are you saying? It was the kind of motion a man makes when reaching for. The game never changes. Your original 1874 survey by Thomas Garrett, filed with the state, overrules any changes made at the county office. William watched her. So you are saying we do not go to court? I am saying when we go. The room fell quiet. Then Elizabeth spoke. When you pulled the stake, did you find the old hole underneath it? Miles nodded once, put on his hat, and was gone. That was Miles Cutter. He was a man who knew some, and I confirmed a Hargrove cattle business was registered in Montana. She paused. I was careful, far more careful than most women who answered those ads. In 8 years with the Pinkertons, the one thing that solved more cases than anything else was having someone in the room willing to say the hard truth. He paused. That is not a quality I overlook. She was back at her desk by 7:30. William came in at 8 and sat in the corner with a book she knew he was not reading. She did not ask why he was there, she just worked. He just sat. I would ask about numbers that did not feel right, and he always had a good answer. That is just how a smart con man works. I had signed them never knowing the real reason because the whole scheme was built in layers, so every single part looked clean. She took up the pen again. That is why I am here, Mr. Turner, to act before the lies set in for good. He looked up from his book in a heartbeat. She reckoned his 8 years as a Pinkerton taught him to keep his temper on a short leash. But she could tell that anger. If Marcus went to Denver, we can find him. He turned from the window. I know people in Denver. Pinkerton people? Used to be. William Turner returned to his chair and sat down. He leaned forward, looking at the floor, and she thought of the state official and the lawyer. He had written it to sound like a normal question to a cattle buyer. It was believable enough that the local operator, a man named Grubb, would not give it a second thought. She laid out the 3 payments to Marcus, all of them as neat as you please. Uncovering a crooked deal always left a cold feeling in your gut. It was like finding a deep crack in the foundation. You had to know, but you dreaded what it meant. Around 8:30, Ruth knocked. Man at the gate, she said, her voice tight with worry. Says his name is Hargrove. He brought a hired man who's waiting with the wagon. Elizabeth slowly turned from her desk. Ruth watched her, understanding when it was best to stay quiet. William's out north with Pete. I can fetch him. How long to fetch him? 15, maybe 20 minutes. This felt different from Whitmore's big play. It was smaller and a whole lot more personal. She thought of the 11 cents, the stove at the depot, and the letters she had burned herself. She had landed here purely by chance, just in time to unravel a scheme meant to take everything from Will Turner. She stood up and smoothed her dress. Do not call for William just yet. I will meet him at the gate. Ruth eyed her. Are you sure? No, she admitted. Send a rider, but give me 10 minutes alone with him first. With Ruth right behind her, she walked toward the gate. The ranch felt exposed, its men scattered out in the pastures, and she knew the timing was no accident. Hargrove was dressed far too fine for a ranch visit, and he carried himself like a man who expects a warm welcome. He tried to fix his face into a look of relief when he saw her. Miss Carter, he said, I'm so glad you are safe. I am sure you are, she answered, stopping a good ways off. What do you want, Mr. Hargrove? His smile faltered. I came to explain why I missed the train. I have read enough dishonest letters to recognize the pattern in yours. You were never coming to that station, she said. That advertisement was bait for an educated woman with no connections, someone whose skills you could use without fair pay. His face changed as he understood. I just do not know if you only wanted the books, or something more. Since you came yourself, I am guessing the books were just the start. The friendly mask on Hargrove's face fell away. You are working for Turner now, he stated. I am. Keeping his books. That and other things. He thought for a moment, then sneered. This place is not as safe as you think. Turner is about to lose his land. And how would you know about his land claim? She asked, her voice like ice. He knew right away he had said too much and tried to backpedal. It is just talk around town. No, it is not, she shot back. The only way to know those details is to read the court papers or talk to someone who did. She stared him right in the eye. So, who told you? He gave her a sharp, ugly smile. You are quite good at that, he said, asking questions like you are a detective. The cold truth hit her. He was not here about a bride who ran off. He was sent on a mission. It was not hard to guess by who. Gerald Whitmore, she said flatly. His smile stayed put. and that was all the answer she needed. "You need to come inside," she commanded. "Your man can wait with the wagon." Then she laid out her cards. "I have a full record of the fraud against this ranch. I have records of payments, the original surveys, all of it. I even have a man in Denver getting a sworn statement as we speak." She watched his face fall as he realized the game was already lost. "The only piece I am missing is you," she continued, "and I'm very good at finding what is missing. So you can either come inside and talk, or you can get back on that wagon. Either way, a federal agent will hear the whole story." After a long silence, Hargrove climbed down from his horse. He walked inside, sat at the table, and told her everything. He was just a small-time hired hand, a pawn in Whitmore's much bigger game, paid to recruit people and spread lies. The newspaper ad was Whitmore's idea to place a spy inside Turner's home. Hargrove was just the man who wrote the letters and found the woman. But they found the wrong one. Elizabeth wrote down his entire confession and had him sign the bottom of every single page. He signed like a man who knew, far too late, he had picked a fight he could never win. About 20 minutes later, William walked in. He saw Elizabeth at the table, a thoroughly beaten man signing papers, and understood it all. He simply sat down at the other end of the table and said nothing. It was the perfect thing to do. When Hargrove put his name on the last page, Elizabeth blotted it, added her own as witness, and put the papers in a case. "This won't stick without a sworn statement," she said. "We need it done in Billings by a notary who owes that bank nothing." She gave him a hard look. "Can you be there Thursday?" He glanced at the papers, then at William, and finally said, "Yes." After he left, Ruth brought in coffee without a word, her quiet way of saying she approved. William picked up his cup. He had a look she was starting to read, a mix of deep thought and a man weighing every word. "You knew he worked for Whitmore before he opened his mouth." "I had a powerful feeling the second he mentioned the land claim." She sipped her coffee. "He knew things folks around here don't. Only Whitmore's men would have that kind of information." She paused. "I just didn't know how they'd play it. Using that advertisement to put a man inside your house was a slick move. He expected a different kind of woman, one so thankful for a job she'd be easy to push around. That's what cheats count on. They guess how you'll act when you're in a bind." Whitmore saw that ad and figured desperation makes a person predictable. She put her cup down. "Most times it does. He wasn't wrong about the situation. He was just wrong about you. It was not me he knew, just the type of person he expected." She looked him in the eye. "And he usually bets right. I am just not the type." William was quiet. Outside, Pete Calloway's voice carried from the pasture, calling to another hand. He was easy and unworried, the sound of a young fellow who didn't know the trouble that had just been handled at the gate. Elizabeth was grateful for it, was grateful. Pete's simple decency was a comfort she hadn't realized she needed. "When Miles gets back," William asked, "and if our man in Denver finds Marcus, where do we stand?" Elizabeth tallied it up in her head, just like a ledger. "In a strong position," she said. "The original state survey beats the county's new one hands down. Those payments to Marcus prove it was deliberate fraud, not some clerical error. Hargrove's word ties Whitmore to the whole scheme." She drew a breath. "The real wild card is the county surveyor. If Whitmore's bunch pressured Clyde Marsh to approve that 1881 change, he could go either way. He might tell the truth, or he might not." She looked right at William. "He is the one man I cannot figure from here." "Marsh has a daughter in Billings," William said. "Married to a man who owns a hardware store. Marsh has been talking retirement for 2 years. He wants to be in Billings with his grandkids." He turned his cup in his hands. "A fellow looking to retire with his family isn't looking for a federal fraud charge." Elizabeth watched him. "You have given Marsh some thought." "I have been thinking on this whole mess since you showed me that book." He set his cup down. "I know these people, Elizabeth. I know what they want and what they fear. That is something no document can give us." He paused. You figured out the scheme. I know the men who used to run it. Between the two of us, she said, we do not have to hope the judge sees it our way. No, ma'am, we do not. A telegram came from Denver that afternoon. A boy brought it to the back door, looking tired of his job. Ruth took it to the study and left it on the desk. Elizabeth stared at the envelope for a while. It held the key to everything. She finally tore it open, read it, and put it down. Then she went to find William. He was by the corral, watching a young horse learn its boundaries. He heard her coming and turned. She held out the telegram. They found Marcus, she said. He is in Denver, and he is willing to talk. William took the paper and read it. A muscle in his jaw jumped. Willing to talk could mean anything from telling the truth to saving his own skin. They both knew it, but it meant he was there. The door was finally open. My man says Marcus is in a boarding house down by the rail yards, William said, his eyes on the paper. Says he looks like a man who has not seen sleep in a week. He folded the telegram. A man who cannot sleep is either bothered by his conscience or scared, Elizabeth said. Or both. He handed the paper back. I reckon I should go. She met his eyes. To Denver? Hargrove gives his statement in Billings on Thursday. That is set. Miles will be back from Helena tomorrow with the official survey. He was already planning it all out. Marcus is the piece that holds it all together. He's not going to talk true to a stranger, but he might talk to me. Because he knows you. Because he ate at my table for 2 years and I paid for his mother's doctor. That has to count for something, even for him. The anger in his voice was low and hard. I would be gone 4 days, 5 at most. Can you manage things here for that long? Elizabeth thought of the ironclad case she had built. She thought of Ruth running the place, of Miles coming home, and of Pete, who had been right about that fella at the gate. She thought of Whitmore, who expected a desperate woman and got her instead. He had no idea what was about to hit him. Yes, she said. Go. He was gone before sunrise the next morning, leaving quiet and with purpose, just as Miles had. It was a leaving that said more than words. Elizabeth stood on the dark porch, listening until the hoofbeats vanished. Then she went inside and lit a lamp at the desk. She had the surveys, the records, and Hargrove's statement. She could see the whole crooked trail. The only thing missing was the authorization from 1881. She'd figured that paper was ash. But one word misdirection changed her mind. It wasn't gone, just hidden well. And she knew an old law meant a copy was sitting in Helena. No one else recalled. She wrote the territorial archivist for a certified copy. A letter so sure of itself it couldn't be ignored. Miles took it to Helena, returning on the 5th day, his horse looking trail-worn. Miles looked trail-worn, his saddlebags heavy with what he had fetched. He set 2 envelopes on the kitchen table for Elizabeth without a word. One was fat, the other thin. He took the coffee Ruth handed him, holding it like it was the first warm thing he had touched in ages. The thick one held the certified copy of Thomas Garrett's 1874 survey, all stamped by the state archivist. Every last line matched William's deeds perfectly, running right to Powder Creek. The thin envelope held the authorization for the county plat revision. Its request came from a firm whose agent was Prescott Helms, the very same lawyer from Billings. The county surveyor, a Clyde Marsh, had approved it on August 14, 1881. But right there in the signature block, in a big, hasty scrawl instead of a lawyer's neat hand, was a name. G.E. Whitmore, Chicago, Illinois. Gerald Whitmore had signed his own name to it. Elizabeth put the paper down and just stared at the lamp. In all her days, she knew men who run big swindles do not make that kind of mistake. It meant Whitmore either thought the dual filing law was a myth or figured Marcus would pull both copies. Either way, that single sheet of paper was the key to everything. Miles, she said, her voice quiet. I am in your debt. Did you find what you were after? More than I ever hoped for. She tapped the document straight and put it safely away. Will anyone in Coldwater know what you were doing? Miles gave it a long thought. That fella at the telegraph is a talker, but I went straight to the Helena depot. Nobody in Coldwater knows I was there or what I brought home. She gave a slow nod. Then we have a few days. Pete Calloway finally looked up from his cup. A few days for what? Elizabeth looked him square in the eye. He had earned a straight answer. Gerald Whitmore put his own signature on the very paper that started this whole crooked mess. His lawyer filed the claim. His man on this ranch tampered with the records. We have paper proof for all three. She let that settle. It is mighty bad for Whitmore. Pete leaned back, letting out a long breath he had not known he was holding. Good, was all he said. William got back on the morning of the 6th day. Elizabeth heard his horse and was on the porch to meet him. He looked worn to the bone but had a fire in his eyes. He handed Pete the reins, his gaze fixed on her. Marcus talked, he said as he reached the steps. Everything? Everything. The 3 payments, the order to take the slips, the name Whitmore's man used. He stopped right in front of her. His voice was steady, but she could feel the storm beneath it. It was the weight of a man betrayed by a friend. He broke down crying during the deposition. Said he had been trying to leave Denver for 2 weeks but just could not do it. Where is he headed? South, maybe Texas. I gave him enough for a ticket and told him if he flew straight, this would be the end of it for him. He held her gaze. You think I was wrong? I think it was your call, she told him. And a man who cannot get out of Denver for 2 weeks is not a threat. Besides, his story just backs our case. The bedrock is in the study. Come see what Miles brought from Helena. He read through every single page at the desk while she watched his face. The survey, the filing authorization, the signed statement. When he got to the page with Whitmore's signature, he just stopped. He set it down. He signed it himself, William said. He must have thought the record was gone. He looked up at her. This is enough. Yes, she said. It is. He was quiet, looking at the stack of papers. Elizabeth had arranged everything just so, with summary pages explaining what each document proved. 8 days of her life, laying Whitmore's whole deceit bare. I need to send a telegram to my lawyer, Billings, William said, and another to the land examiner in Helena. He pushed back from the chair. How much time do you reckon we have? He might already know something is wrong. The fence cutting stopped when Miles rode out. A man like that notices patterns. She folded her hands. I would guess we have until the week's end before he makes a move. It happened faster. The very next morning, Prescott Helms himself rode out from Coldwater in a buggy. He had another man with him, a city lawyer who looked stiff and uncomfortable. Helms was a slim man with watchful eyes and a professional calm. But Elizabeth could see that calm was fraying at the edges. Mr. Turner, Helms said with the tip of his hat. I was hoping for a private word about the survey. Miss Carter handles my land papers, William said. Anything you have to say can be said in front of her. Helms sized Elizabeth up, not with disrespect, but like he had spotted a problem. Miss Carter, I believe I've heard your name from the Caldwell land case back in Cincinnati. Then, you know this is not my first time down this road, Elizabeth replied. Something shifted in his eyes. Mr. Turner, he said, Mr. Whitmore is willing to withdraw his survey claim. In exchange, we would have an agreement to take no further action. The quiet that fell was sudden. William looked at Elizabeth, a whole conversation passing between them. No, William said. Helms had expected it. Mr. Turner, this sort of fight can be... We have the dual-filed authorization from the Helena archive, Elizabeth said, cutting him off. The one your client signed himself. We have payment records and a sworn deposition from his hired man. We have the certified original 1874 survey that makes your client's map worthless. And we have a signed statement from the spy he planted in this house. She held his gaze. We sent copies to the Federal Land Office in Helena. They have opened a formal investigation. She paused. Withdrawing your civil suit will not stop a federal fraud investigation, Mr. Helms. You know that as well as I do. Their lawyer looked plain spooked. Liz told him they had the paper enough for federal charges. She said Whitmore best cooperate, and quick. He just tipped his hat and drove his buggy home, a beaten man. Good day to you, Mr. Turner. Pete, a ranch hand, saw the buggy leave and knew it was a win. 12 days on, a federal examiner showed up. For 3 days, Liz walked him through every crooked paper. The government man was mighty impressed. He said in 14 years he'd never seen a stronger case. Weeks later, Whitmore was charged. His crooked partners lost their jobs and their reputations right alongside him. His retirement was likely not what he'd pictured. The feds found Whitmore's whole business was rotten. Because of their fight, 17 other ranching families across 2 counties got their land back before the next spring. She read about the 17 families in the Helena paper on a snowy morning. Her hard work had been the master key for them all. She thought about her own past and how she refused to be broken. William came in and just said the number. They had won. A small smile touched William's lips. I have a question for you, he said. He set his cup on the table and met her eyes with a look that meant business, no beating around the bush. And I need a straight answer, not a careful one. I try to give straight answers, she replied. You give precise ones. That is not the same thing. His gaze held hers. Are you figuring on leaving come spring? She had been thinking on it. This was not like leaving Cincinnati. That was just about survival. This was a choice. The thought has crossed my mind, she admitted. And? She glanced at the newspaper on the table in this room that felt like home. She watched the snow fall over land she now knew by heart. She thought of 17 families, warm in their homes, because she knew where to find the truth in a stack of old papers. She thought of William Turner, who gave a stranger a good job with good pay and trusted her with everything he had built. I have been thinking, she said, that a ranch this big, over 4,800 acres, needs a permanent bookkeeper. William nodded slowly. It surely does. The records alone are a full-time job. Then you have tax filings, water rights papers, and the cattle contracts, which are not set up in your favor, she continued. And on top of that, some of those 17 families we helped. They are asking if I might look at their paperwork, too. Ours, William said softly, catching the word she had used. The ranches, she corrected, but then stopped. He had asked for the truth. I came here with 11 cents to my name, she said, looking right at him. I wanted to start over where no one knew me. What I did not expect. She paused, choosing her words. I did not expect that the very skills I was running from were exactly what was needed right here. The things I learned that cost me so much were the perfect tools for this place. She met his gaze. I feel useful here, and I feel settled. I have not felt that way in a long time. William was quiet for a spell as the snow fell outside. Their coffee grew cold. There is a land examiner's office opening in Billings next year, he said finally. They will need people who can read records and spot a fake. It is steady, respected work. He looked at her. You could have that job in a heartbeat. You are more qualified than anyone they are likely to find. She understood he was giving her an honest choice, not trying to fence her in. I know, she said quietly. But that office in Billings does not have 17 families who need my help, she said. And it does not have this kitchen or Ruth or Pete trying to reason with that cat. Her gaze was steady on his. Or you. The words settled in the quiet air between them. William looked at her with an expression she was starting to understand. He was a man who felt things deep but spoke with care. I should tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear it plain, not as a complication of your job. Go on. There was a woman in St. Louis, he began. We were a match in some ways, but not in the ways that build a life. She needed the city, and I needed open country. When I left for Montana, I knew I was leaving that behind for good. I figured that the life I was choosing and the life a woman like that would want were two different things. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. Then you sat on that gate and told Hargrove you had built a full evidentiary record. I saw his face when he understood what that meant, and I thought... He paused. I thought that I have never seen anything as clear and strong as the way you work, and the life I built here, and the person you are. They are not a mismatch. They are the only match I have ever been able to picture for this land, and this work, and for me. Elizabeth took a moment with that. She considered his words carefully, making sure she understood them right. That is a very precise declaration, she said. I figured you would appreciate precision. I do. She looked at him. I am not easy. I am so thorough it is a bother, and I will fix any messy system I find. And I absolutely cannot stand it when the books do not balance. She paused. It also seems I am handy when a man tries to steal a ranch from his neighbors. I noticed that, he said. Then you know what you are asking for. I know exactly what I am asking. He met her eyes. Elizabeth, do you want to stay? Not just as the bookkeeper, she said. As the woman who calls this kitchen her own. As the partner who builds what comes next with you. His gaze was steady. Stay. Because you choose to. Not because you have to. The snow fell gently outside, and the Montana winter light turned soft and blue. Elizabeth thought of a train station stove, of 11 cents, and of a woman who fed her last hope to the flames. She remembered her mother saying pride buys you dignity when times are hard. She thought of William Turner, who saw a person in need of work, not charity. He gave her a job and his trust. She had watched his steady hands turn a crooked audit into a federal case with the same calm he used on horses and fences. She looked at him across the table. This ranch had become her home. She said the true thing, not the careful thing. I already have, she said. And so, in the Montana Territory, in the winter of 1882, Elizabeth Carter, who arrived with nothing but her pride, chose the life that was waiting for her. She took hold of it with both hands and did not let go. You know, Elizabeth's story shows us that your lowest point can be a new beginning. Real strength is not about never falling. It is about how you choose to get back up. We tell stories like this right here, stories about the heart of the West, about cowboys, family, and the grit that holds folks together. If this tale touched your heart, let me know in the comments. And be sure to like and subscribe so you do not miss the next one.
This story exists within the realm of fiction, where imagination shapes reality. Any similarities to real-life individuals, organizations, or events are entirely coincidental. The author does not endorse or represent any real entity through the content of this work. Out on the wide, quiet plains of Montana, where the wind carries both truth and consequence, Elizabeth Carter's story settles into something deeper than just a tale of survival. It becomes a reminder of what a person is truly made of when everything familiar is taken away. She arrived with 11 cents, a burned past, and a reputation the world had already judged. Yet what she carried, though unseen, proved far more valuable than money or status. Clarity of mind, honesty in action, and the quiet refusal to be broken by circumstances she did not choose. There's a hard lesson in this story, one the West has taught time and time again. Life will not always be fair, and careful choices do not guarantee safe outcomes. Elizabeth did everything right. She checked the facts, asked the questions, guarded her judgment, and still, she was misled. That truth alone cuts deep. because it reminds us that even our best efforts cannot always protect us from the intentions of others. But what defines a person is not whether they were deceived. It's what they choose to do once they see the truth clearly. What makes Elizabeth remarkable is not that she avoided hardship, but that she refused to let hardship define her. Where another might have turned bitter or withdrawn, she leaned into the very skills that once brought her pain. The same knowledge that had tied her to scandal became the tool that uncovered a greater injustice. That is a powerful idea. Sometimes the very thing we wish had never happened to us becomes the exact thing the world needs from us. Pain, when understood and faced honestly, can sharpen a person instead of breaking them. There's also something to be said about trust. Not the blind kind, but the earned kind. William Turner did not offer her charity. He offered her respect, work, and truth. And in return, she gave him the same. Their bond was not built on promises or appearances, but on actions, consistency, and the willingness to face hard realities together. In a world where deception ran deep, their partnership stood as proof that integrity still has weight. That when two people meet each other with honesty, something steady and lasting can take root. And then there's the broader ripple of it all. Elizabeth thought she was solving one problem, saving one ranch. But truth has a way of reaching further than we expect. Because she chose to act, because she refused to look away, 17 families kept their homes. That's the quiet power of doing the right thing. You rarely see the full extent of its impact while you're in the middle of it. One decision, one act of courage, can carry far beyond your own life. So what does this story leave us with? It reminds us that dignity is not something the world gives you. It's something you hold on to, even when everything else is stripped away. It teaches us that being underestimated can be a kind of strength if you know your worth and stay steady in it. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that a fresh start isn't always about running from the past. Sometimes it's about finally understanding it and using it to build something better. Out here in stories of the Wild West, we often talk about survival, about grit, about standing your ground. But stories like Elizabeth's go a step further. They speak of compassion, of fairness, of the quiet responsibility we carry toward one another. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about holding on to land or winning a fight. It's about choosing to leave things better than you found them. And maybe that's the truest measure of a person. Not where they started, or what they lost, but what they chose to build when they had every reason not to try.